So, as we watch international law collapse and the United Nations be rendered impotent and declared an enemy by the very institutions that founded it, and as we watch the Western world fully descend into fascism in a final futile attempt to save imperial colonialism and capitalism, now is a good time to remember that yes, even this story is not new. In fact, the beats we are seeing are less a sequel and more a gritty reboot of the story of the League of Nations, and the similarity and trajectory are eerily similar. The League of Nations was established after the First World War in 1919 with the main intention of stopping another world war from ever breaking out. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. By 1920, the League of Nations was officially founded and headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. Optimism is high at this point as everyone is still reeling from the horrors of World War I, and the League promises that maybe there won't ever be another big war. In 1921, the Permanent Court of International Justice is established in The Hague, and it is intended that all international disputes will be handled by the Court of International Justice going forward. In 1924, the Geneva Convention is established, which prohibits, among other things, chemical weapons and guarantees the rights of soldiers of war, civilians, and the rights of children. So far, this all sounds well and good, right? There's just one small problem. Actually, it's a really big problem, and that is the fact there is an irreconcilable contradiction at the heart of the League of Nations that would never be solved, and that same contradiction is the one that the UN still suffers from today, which is also why the UN is collapsing. And that contradiction is that the UN, like the League before it, believes and promotes the ideas of human rights and self-determination, as in people have a right to determine their own nation's laws, culture, and independence, which is all well and good. I think we can all get behind that. That is, of course, except for the colonial empires. And that is the core problem. The colonial empires, such as the United States today, and Britain and France in the past, all want self-determination for themselves, while also stealing it from billions of other people who they are oppressing under colonial rule. Palestine, Congo, Sudan, Philippines, Cuba, and many other countries are still being crushed under the heel of the US colonial empire. And it's no different from the past when India, Kenya, and Malaysia were crushed under the British Empire, or Algeria, Vietnam, and Syria being crushed under the French Empire. This core contradiction of calling for freedom while also being the hammer that smashes it is the main driving force that caused the last two world wars, and is now directly leading us towards the Third World War. But back to the League of Nations, because by 1933 the consequences of those contradictions start to become very clear. Imperial ambitions cannot coexist with a world of peace and freedom. In 1933, Japan invades Manchuria, in preparation for a planned larger invasion of China later. The League of Nations condemns Japan, so what does Japan do? Well, they just ignore it and withdraw from the League of Nations. This is the first major alarm that goes off. If the League does not enforce its resolutions, and if violators do not face any consequences for violating international law, then what is it worth? Doesn't that sound familiar? Japan shrugging off the League without consequence then kicks off a ripple effect that would directly lead the world into World War II. Also in 1933, and looking to expand their colonial empire, Germany leaves the League as well. In 1936, knowing now that the League is totally impotent, Italy invades Ethiopia, which back then was called Abyssinia. Haile Selassie, the leader of Ethiopia, will beg the world to stand on its principles and do something. They do not. Haile Selassie would famously say about their cowardice, "It is us today, but it will be you tomorrow." Also in 1936, the Spanish Civil War breaks out and the League stands around as the fascist nations flood military aid to Franco's fascist government. In 1937, Italy withdraws from the League as well. Later that year, Japan invades the rest of China. And by this point, the League stands in name only, but it's already dead. In 1939, the Germans invade Poland and the Soviet Union invades Finland, and World War II is on. Over the next 6 years, more than 80 million people will be killed. In 1945, the United Nations Charter is signed, but the core contradiction is never resolved. The last colonial empire is not dead yet, but it is dying. And like all dying empires, it has turned its colonial violence up to 11, and even turned it against its own citizens in a vain attempt to stave off collapse. But the US empire will not escape its fate. because one way or another, that core contradiction is going to be resolved. And world peace can never exist while even a single capitalist-fueled colonial empire remains. So, as we watch the United States and all its colonial puppets shred international law to protect its collapsing colonial projects, know that this is not the end of the world, it is just the end of an era that started with British colonialism and is now ending with the collapse of the final colonial empire, the United States. A better world is coming, and once the final empire collapses, perhaps the League of Nations, now version 3.0, may finally deliver the peace and justice the world has been crying out for since the first colonial ship left a European harbour nearly 500 years ago. Anyway, if you want to hear the long version of this podcast, go to patreon.com/Triploi or any of your favourite podcasty places and you'll find it there to listen to. And if you're enjoying these videos and these podcasts and you would like to support the creation of this content, again, head to the Patreon and become a free member. And hopefully this has given you something to think about.